Alright, so here what we're going to do is we're going to create a timer that plays while we play through our level, and then as we transition to a new level, we want to capture that time variable and then kind of set the timer to be at that current state, basically, so the timer kind of is consistent through two levels. And then likewise, we want to play through level 1, end the level, start the new level, carry on through that one, but continue with our same time. So a couple things to set up first is let's make sure we have a level 1 and a level 2. So if I hop into my level 2 quick here, we just need to make sure we have the basics set up so that we can successfully load up the level. So I just added a landscape. I copied over my same lighting situation that I had in my level 1, added some collectibles just for fun, but the main things you need in order for the game to actually run is you have to add a player start, so you know where to spawn in, and then you need to go over to the world settings and make sure you have the world settings set to your game mode that you created. So for me, I have my rolling ball game mode, rolling ball game. So I just go to my game mode override in the world settings and make sure it's set to my rolling ball game. That way, when I press play, I have all my same controls that I have in level 1. So go ahead and make sure you have a level 1 and a level 2, something to transition between. So I'm going to go back to level 1 and I'm going to set up my timer. So I already have a timer set up. If you look at the top and the middle of my screen, it's just counting up. But I'm going to go ahead and make a new one for the sake of this demo. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new blueprint, a user interface widget blueprint, and I'm just going to call, it's going to be a user widget. I'm going to go ahead and call it timer, if I can spell, timer UI. And let's go ahead and open that up. So we already have a bit of experience in the UI, but we're going to go ahead and create a new one. So first things first, let's add in our palette, we're going to add a canvas panel. And then we're just going to add a couple text actors. So I got one, I got two. Go ahead and split them apart. And we'll actually need one more. So one of them's going to be to track my seconds, one will be to track my minutes, and the other one's just going to be for like the colon in between. So let me select my first one here. Let me just call it min, or actually I'll set it to 0, 0 for now. My second one I'll set to be a colon. We're looking up here. My third one I'll also set to be 0, 0. And now you can see we can go ahead and arrange them. We got a bit of a timer going here. So I'm going to go ahead, select all these, and I'm going to anchor them to the center of my screen. I'll just put them right in the top in the middle. And let's also go ahead and size them up a bit to like 40. 40. Let me redistribute them a bit. Oh, and see how they're kind of leaking out of the box? If you select them, select all your text actors here, and then go over to the slot, the top kind of transform settings, you'll see size to content. If I check that on, it'll keep the like bounding box of the actor equal to the size of it. So if you scale it up, if it changes, add more characters, what have you, you will be left with, you know, it just makes it nicer. And then last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to label these a little bit. So if I select my first text up at the top, it's just called text block 50. I'm going to call this minutes. Oh, maybe minutes. And then I'm going to call this one seconds. Great. So now we have our little UI element. And then now we got to drive what defines what the content of this is. So at the moment, it's, if we add this to the scene, it'll just display as this, but we need to tie minutes and seconds to it. So to do that, let's go ahead and select our minutes here, and we're going to go ahead and bind them. So if we look over in the content to the text area, we'll see this little bind option. If I hit that drop down and create a new binding, we'll be brought over to this new function that says get minutes text, and it's just looking for us to define what the text should be. So that's that. We now need to tell it what to put in here. So we're going to need two new variables. So I'm going to go over to my little variable section. I'm going to press plus to create a new variable. This one's going to be called timer minutes. I'm going to create it as a float. And then I'm going to create one more variable called timer seconds, also float. And now we have these two variables, and these variables will run the timer text. So if I grab the timer minutes, drag it into my scene, and get the text, and then plug it into the return value, it'll do a little conversion. And now whatever my timer minutes is set to will be what my timer text shows up as. So let's do that same process for the seconds. I'm going to select my seconds, go over to the text in the content, hit bind, create a new binding. It'll pop us over to the graph. We already created our variable, so this time we'll take our seconds variable. We're going to get that variable, plug it into the return value. It'll do its little conversion, and at this point, it's ready to go. Ready to go as in, our components have a variable plugged into them. Now we just need to define what that variable is. So to do that, we can do that right inside of this widget blueprint, because if we go back to the graph, we have an event graph, and we have some nodes we can work from. So this here is where we're going to create the timer logic. So every 1 second, it's going to add 1 to the seconds, and then once it gets to 59 seconds, it's going to add 1 to the minutes, and so on and so forth to create our timer. So let's see how that'll work. So I'm going to delete these two up here, and we're going to use the event tick. So out of the event tick, we're going to grab a delay. We're going to set the duration of the delay to 1, which would be 1 second. And then we have over here, you see we have our variables. We have our timer minutes, timer seconds. We're going to go ahead and set our timer seconds to be equal to timer seconds plus 1. So we'll grab an add node, add 1, and then plug the output into the set. So every 1 second, we're going to add 1 to timer seconds. And we got our first little section. So after we add 1 to our timer seconds, we need to do a little check. So let's grab a branch. These are like our if statements. And now we need to set what the condition is. So when is it true, when is it false? And here, we're basically deciding when do we instead add 1 to minutes. Well, it's going to be when timer seconds is equal to greater than 59. Because, 59, 60 adds 1 to the seconds and kind of resets itself. So once it's greater than 59, we will set it to true and go on to the next bit. So let's go ahead and grab our timer seconds. And then out of the timer seconds, we're going to get a greater than. And then we're going to check if it's greater than 59. Oh, 59. And if this value is greater than 59, it's going to spit out a Boolean value of true. So we can plug that right into the condition of the branch. And so if it's true, or if it's false, we don't want to do anything. We just want to carry on adding seconds. But if it's true, we want to instead, we're going to set our minutes instead. So we're going to grab minutes, we're going to set minutes, and just like over here, we're going to set it to current minutes plus 1. So we'll add 1. Plug that in. So now, once we get to 59, we want to add 1 to our minutes, and then we just need to reset our seconds back to 0, which is as easy as go ahead and grab your seconds, set the seconds, set it to 0, which is the default. So with this little piece of blueprint complete, when we play our level, as long as this widget is running in the scene, it will constantly be adding 1 to the seconds, 1 to the seconds, until it gets to 59, add 1 to the minutes, reset the seconds. So let's go ahead and compile and save this blueprint, or save this widget, and now we just need to implement it into our level. So if I go ahead, I'm in my level 1, so your first level that you're working from. I'm going to go ahead and open my level blueprints. So again, that's up in the top left, these little 3 boxes. Hit the drop down, open level blueprints. And remember that each level has its own level blueprints. So to add my UI to the screen, it's a simple little blueprint here off of the event begin play within the level blueprints. We're going to grab a create widget. And I kind of got it here. I'll just redo it fresh. Out of the event begin play, get a create widget. After you create that, in the class section, you have to choose the UI you want to add to the screen. So in my case, I want to add my timer UI. So I just hit the little drop down, find my timer UI. And then after we create the widget, we need to add it to the viewport. So I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to go to add to viewport. And then, so it's going to add to the viewport. It's looking for a target. Who's it going to add to the viewport? And it's going to be, the widget we created here. So now if I compile, save this, and go back to my game, when I press play, here's my widget, my timer in the screen. And notice how it's counting up. So if we let it keep going, it would eventually, get to 59 and then, reset to 0 and then add 1 to the minutes. So you can kind of finagle this timer to look how you want. There's lots of ways to go about it, but this will give you that basic functionality you're looking for. So the next kind of thing we need to do now is we need to transition from this level to a next level. So, creating that functionality is easy enough. We're just going to create a blueprint with a collider box. When we run into the collider box, we're going to load a new level. But the trick will be to capture our current time, tracked by our timer, and then load that into the next level so that we can carry on. Because here we're kind of trying to get a relay effect, where you're adding the times of each level together. So if you wanted to time them individually of each other, you just wouldn't do this part, but it's kind of case per case. But in our case, we want to continue the time to the next one. So we need a way to get the value we track right now, so our 120, 122, 3, right now on our timer, we need a way to get that value into the next level. And to do that, we're going to utilize something called a game instance. So how I like to think of a game instance is just a blueprint that is kind of persistent between your whole game when you're loading, unloading levels. So if you put data in the game instance blueprint, you can access that data in a different level. So kind of the procedure here will be to, when we go to load our level, we're going to track the data in the game instance, and then when we load into our new level, level 2, we're going to pull that information to reset the timer to whatever the end time was, and then it'll just carry on going. So first thing we need to do for that is we got to create a game instance blueprint. So I'm just going to right click in my content browser, create a new blueprint class, and then in the search bar down here I'm going to search for game instance. Game instance. Spelling is hard. And then we're just going to grab this one right here called game instance. Select. It'll create a new one, and then go ahead and rename it. I'm going to call mine rolling ball underscore game instance. Cool. And now it's created. And then one other step to make it official is you got to set it as the game instance for your game, because you can only have one game instance blueprint, but you have to tell Unreal to use this one. So to set that up, we just go to our settings, top right, go to your project settings, search bar, just search game instance, and then you'll see right here game instance class. I already have mine set, but I'll go ahead and reset it. Look for your rolling ball game instance or whatever you named yours. Select it so it's in here, and now it'll be set as the game instance for your game. And we're feeling good. Alright, so now let's go ahead, open up that game instance. It'll have the same look as you expect, an event graph, place for variables, all that. But we're basically going to use this just to hold variables. So I'm going to go over to my variables, and let's create a couple new ones. So I'm going to create timer minutes, set it to a float. Then I'll create timer seconds, float, compile, save. So now we have these variables in here, so we can cast to this and set them. So those are ready to go. So let's start thinking about creating our little blueprint that will transition to the next level. So I'll build this in here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new blueprint class. Let's create a good old actor, and I'm just going to call this level transition. And let's open this up. So component wise, doesn't need much. I'm going to go ahead and add actually a static mesh. Just because I want to put something that I can actually see, what's going on and where it is in the scene. So I'm just going to add a static mesh, and then if I go to the little static mesh section in the details, and I think if I search for door, there's actually, in the default level is like a door frame. So I can just add that in. Now I have like a little window to roll through. This is purely just so I can see where the transition is. And then after the little static mesh, I'm also going to add a collision. So I'll go ahead and add a box collision, and then I'm just going to size that collision up to fit my little door I got going here. So something like this. Let's compile, let's save, and just to kind of further show what I was talking about, I can place this in the level, scale it up, and then when I play my game, I can actually see where the door is, so I know where to go when I'm testing it out. But that's fine. Great. So we got our components in. Let's start building out the functionality. So back in my level transition blueprint, I'm going to hop to the event graph. Let's delete these, and we need an overlap event. So I'll select my static mesh. In the details, scroll to the bottom. where we have all our events, and we're going to grab a on component begin overlap and open level. Yeah, so on overlap, what do we want to do? We want to open level. Open level by name. Type in the name of your new level. So mine's called level 2. And already just this should load us into the next level. So that's just what I'm going to test first. Let me make sure that's working. So when I go through this door, I should load into my level 2. It did not work. So let's have a look. Just double check one. Oh, over here. So first thing to check if it's not working, let me go to the here. Let me just make sure I got my level name right. Level 2. Level 2. Let me check something else quick. Alright, so I figured out the problem. Simple issue. When I created my begin overlap event, I based it off overlapping with the static mesh rather than the box collision. So if something's not working, always check your events, check your nodes, make sure things are how they should be. So, select your box collision, go to the details, grab the on component begin overlap, then out of that, go right into an open level name, open level by name. Then you got your level name here, level 2, type it in, compile, save, hop back into the game. So now when I press play, I'm rolling over here, and when I go through this door, I should pop into the next level. There I am, in my level. So now I'm in my new level, but we notice a couple things. I don't have my UI anymore, I don't got my timer, and that's no good. That's what we need. We want that. So we gotta set that up. So I'm gonna escape out of this, throw me back here. First thing, let's go ahead and jump into the second level, so my level 2. I'll go ahead and save. We'll load in. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go back into our level blueprints for this level and make sure we add that UI to the screen. Because remember, every level has its own level blueprints. So since there's nothing set up in here, we're not telling it to add that UI, that timer UI, to the screen at all. So I'm going to go ahead to my top left, open my level blueprints. Here they are. Then out of the event begin play of my level 2 level blueprints, we're going to go ahead and create widget. Select the class. I want my timer UI. Then we're going to add to viewport. And make sure you just plug the return value of the create widget into the target, just so it knows what to add. Compile, save. Cool. So now, just to check that that's working, I'm in my second level. I'll press play, and there it is. There's my timer. So now we have the timer set up in both things, in both levels. And now what we want to do is get that, carry the time over from the first level to the second level. So let's go ahead and hop back to level 1. So if we remember, we're going to try to track that data, track the time, the current time, in our game instance blueprint. So let's, we already have that set up. It's got 2 variables in it, our timer seconds and our timer minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my level transition blueprint right here. And we're going to add on to this. So before we open the level, we want to first set the variables in the game instance blueprint so that they're available in the next one. So I think to do that, we'll go ahead and we're going to cast directly to our timer blueprint. So I'm going to cast to timer UI. And then as the timer UI, we're going to get timer seconds. And we're going to get timer minutes. So remember, these are the two variables that are constantly changing as the game plays. So we want to get whatever they currently are. And then we want to cast to game instance. We're going to cast to our rolling ball game instance. And we want to set timer minutes. And we want to set timer seconds. So let's go ahead and add these to the execution list. Plug in the arrows. And then we want the value of these to be equal to minutes and seconds. So let me go ahead and clean this up a little bit. Again, it's like in the widget itself is where we're, changing and tracking all of the minutes and seconds. And then we're just kind of transferring that data to a place we can access in the next level, which in our case will be on that game instance blueprint. So let's compile. It's probably going to yell at me. Okay, so here the timer or the audio went out, so I'm just recording over it again. But so the issue we were having, why we were getting those errors, was that we weren't really able to cast to the widget blueprint directly in a way we were, hoping to do. So instead, we're just gonna switch a couple things around. Mainly, we're going to, instead of adding the UI to the screen in the level blueprints, we're going to add the UI to the screen in the rolling ball pawn. So to do that, we basically hop into the rolling ball pawn, and once we're in there, we're going to find the event begin play section, and we're going to add in our create widget, add to viewport, right in line with that event begin play. Now, additionally to that, we need to create a reference to the widget in question, so the timer UI. We need to create a reference so that we can, within another blueprint, access any of the variables and stuff. So event begin play, create the widget, and if we right click on the return value, we have the option to promote it to a variable. So it'll take whatever the output of that node is and turn it into a variable that we can access. So I named mine timer UI. So I got this little setup: event begin play, create widget, set the new variable timer UI, and then add it to the viewport. So once it's added to the viewport, we're basically still going to get the same, the same results that we want. And once we have those same results, we will be good to go. So now I'm hopping back into the level transition blueprint and just updating it with my new blueprints in question. So instead of casting to the timer UI, we're going to cast to your pawn. So in my case, mine's called rolling ball. Cast to rolling ball, get the object type, get player pawn, and then out of the player pawn, we're going to get the timer UI. So that's, remember, we promoted it to a variable, and now we can access that variable, which is a reference to that widget. So as the rolling ball, we're going to get the timer UI. And then once we get the timer UI, we can get any of the variables that are within that UI. In our case, the timer minutes and the timer seconds. So grab timer minutes, grab timer seconds. It should look kind of just how I have it. And then the remaining kind of portion of this blueprint should stay the same. After we get those two variables, we're going to cast to the game instance. And then within the instance, we have another set of minute and second variables that we are going to set to be equal to the ones within our UI. So I'm just plugging those into their corresponding values. And then, of course, after that, we're going to open the next level. So just, again, to recap this level transition, once we interact with it, it's going to take a snapshot of whatever our timer values are, store them in the game instance, load up the new level, and then our goal will be to set the timer values to be equal to the ones we stored in the game instance. So here I'm just showing that we can still transition, but our timer will reset back to 0 when we get into the new level. So to fix that, we need to hop back into our widget blueprint, so our timer UI, where all that timer functionality is happening. And once we're in there, we're just going to add another little bit of code that will set our timer seconds and timer minutes variables that are in our timer UI to be equal to the ones from the game instance. So we're hopping in to the widget blueprint. We're in the event graph. And we're going to start adding all this in. So, here is where I start to realize that the sound has not been on for the last little bit. And I'm looking for the event we're going to use. We're going to use event construct, which is an event that will trigger as soon as this widget spawns into existence. So our hope here is that spawn the widget into existence, set the values equal to the values we stored in the game instance, and then the timer will carry on running as normal, just starting from different values. Okay, so now that we have our, we're inside of the timer UI. This is where the timer stuff is created. We're now going to set it so that when this UI is spawned, it's going to go communicate with the game instance, pull the values that it has there, and set our timer seconds. So we can go ahead and grab a event, or let's search construct. And we have this event construct. So this event is called as soon as the widget is spawned into existence. So it'll happen, and then this will kind of go on. So what we're going to do is we're going to cast to the game instance. Make sure the object set to get game instance. And then as the game instance, we're going to get timer seconds. Let's see here. Yep, get timer, turn off context sensitive if what you're looking for isn't popping up. We want to get the timer seconds. I just had the wrong cast to node here. So again, I'm going to start with my event construct. Off of the event construct, we're going to grab a cast to rolling ball game instance class. So we want our game instance, but make sure you grab the one that you created, that you named. So I got mine here, rolling ball game instance. Set the object to get game instance. And then as the rolling ball game instance, we're going to get timer seconds. Let's see, get timer seconds. Yep, okay. As you saw, get timer So I have a couple things called get timer seconds, so just make sure you're grabbing the variable that is under the game instance. So I got my timer seconds, timer minutes, and now I want to set these ones. In hindsight, I probably should have given them slightly different names so I knew if they were from the instance or the blueprint, but that's okay. So I'll get my seconds, or I'll set my seconds, set my minutes. So after I cast, we'll set seconds to seconds, minutes to minutes. All right. So again, just to kind of review what's going on here. So I'm in my widget blueprint. This is where the timer logic is. And when the widget is constructed, it's going to cast to the game instance, and it's going to grab from there the timer minutes and timer seconds values that we set in our level transition blueprint. And then it's going to set the minutes and seconds within variables within here to be equal to that. So we got to construct, cast, get the values, set the values. Cool. So let me compile, save, and let's check this out, see if it's working. So I'm in my level 1. If everything's working, we should see our timer in the top middle going up and up. And when I run into my little doorway over here, it should capture whatever the time is, open my new level, spawn me in, and set the timer to be equal to, whatever this is. So let's see. And it should just carry on. And there we go. So we got that working. And now that we have those variables tracked in our game instance, when the game's over, if we want to record our time, we can, we have those variables captured. We have ways to capture those variables, and then we can use them however we want. Like if we just want to display our final score or something. But that should be the timer, getting it to work between levels.